This is Italy and France. Both are neighboring countries sharing a 515-kilometer border that is almost entirely mountainous. They share a Mediterranean climate in their southern halves, which is why both nations are global leaders in wine. The climate is perfect for grapes. If France and Italy were one economy, they would be the world's third largest economy, bigger than Germany, Japan, and India. They both have similar levels of GDP per person, with France at around $66,000 and Italy at $63,000, when you consider how much you can buy with that money. In terms of economic structure, both countries exhibit striking similarities in core production sectors, such as manufacturing and agriculture. Together, they own nearly every major luxury brand in the world. No other economy comes close. Their brands are built on centuries of craftsmanship, whether it's a French handbag or an Italian sports car. They are the most visited countries in the world. Together, they would control a near monopoly on global cultural and wine tourism and be the undisputed global leaders in high-end agricultural exports, like wine, cheese, and olive oil. Their bureaucracy also looks the same. Both countries are famous for their complex red tape, rigid labor laws, and high taxes. Starting a business in either requires a lot of paperwork. If you look at how their stock markets have grown over the past 30 years, you'll see that they follow a similar path. That's because both countries' economies are highly dominated by luxury and consumer export products. If we look at their economic expansion, it also looks similar. After World War II, both nations experienced massive reconstruction and modernization of their economic structures. France was among the first countries in the world to begin the Industrial Revolution. However, its development during the 18th and 19th centuries was unique. It took a slow and steady approach compared to its European rivals, favoring small artisanal industries over large-scale factories. This transition moved the economy from a reliance on land and labor to capital development, utilizing machinery and technology to increase output. Following World War II, the French government recognized that its reliance on small companies was a weakness and began taking an active hand in forming large-scale operations to compete globally. During that time, the government took a directive role in the economy. The state created massive enterprises in sectors it deemed essential, such as national banks, high-speed rail, and Air France. This was a compromise between pure market capitalism and state ownership, allowing the government to drive industry at a scale that private small businesses could not achieve. Today, France is a surprisingly industrious nation that manufactures everything from aircraft and automobiles to high-tech equipment and cosmetics. A significant portion of French manufacturing thrives on the global perception of artisanal craftsmanship. This allows for extreme value adding. Similar booms have occurred in Italy. It has experienced several periods of rapid economic expansion since World War II, often referred to as economic miracles. Driven by international aid, industrial retooling, and a global reputation for high-quality exports. Between 1947 and 1951, the United States provided $1.2 billion in aid to rebuild infrastructure and prevent the spread of communism. The Korean War further boosted Italian industry as the U.S. contracted Italy to produce military supplies. The country successfully converted wartime industries into domestic sectors focused on consumer goods like cars and refrigerators. Its small and medium-sized enterprises became the backbone of the economy, fueled by high productivity and increased exports. Today, Italy specializes in high-value exports, such as luxury fashion, machinery, and fast cars. Consumers are willing to pay a premium for Italian craftsmanship, which allowed the country to add massive value to its products. This was supported by a large available labor force that serves as the cornerstone for the modern Italian economy. The turning point came with the adoption of the euro. Both economies doubled their economic output in less than a decade. The common currency made it easier to attract foreign investment and eliminated exchange rate risks for trading partners. The EU, which insists on free trade and freedom of movement, helped trigger a rise in the tourism industry. But it also just forced out more of the young workers that they had left. Both the countries are facing brain drain, which refers to the exodus of highly skilled and productive workers who leave the country in search of better economic opportunities elsewhere. Young, skilled French workers can already make more money in places like Germany, the UK, and especially the US. France has one of the highest rates of brain drain of any advanced economy in the world. If they raise taxes to keep the system of strong protections and strong benefits, more people are going to leave. Likewise, if they remove those systems and introduce a more competitive dynamic to their economy, then beyond just annoying economic participants who were promised they could retire at 55 on a healthy pension, it's going to give workers even less reason to stick around, because their wages would fall and their working conditions would be worse. Whereas Italy's situation is even worse. Italy is a net sender of graduates rather than a net receiver. While the country invests in educating its youth, it fails to retain them, effectively subsidizing the workforces of its economic rivals. This problem is partially acute because Italy already has a low rate of tertiary education attainment compared to its peers, making the loss of the few graduates it does produce even more damaging. Young Italians frequently move to countries like Germany, France, the Netherlands, or even Luxembourg because they can earn significantly more money for their skills. Italian industries, dominated by small and medium-sized enterprises, are often less productive than larger European firms. This lower productivity means that businesses cannot afford to raise wages to compete with international rivals. Their worlds of business are near identical too. Their market is dominated by the luxury brand, France often leading in overall market value and the number of top-tier fashion houses like LVMH, Hermes, Dior, Chanel, creating concentrated market power with high barriers to entry. This creates a classic oligopoly, where a small number of players control the entire industry. Italy has the highest number of luxury goods companies globally, but many are family-owned and smaller than French conglomerates. These luxury goods thrive on heritage craftsmanship and high-spending tourists. Visitors from China, the Middle East, and the US flock to Paris and Milan, fueling sales. However, this heavy reliance on discretionary luxury spending makes them vulnerable during global contractions. If there is some kind of global crisis, tourism stops really fast. Even during a mild economic crisis, luxuries like foreign travel and designer goods are the first things people cut. We saw this in 2020. This effectively means that both nations are great during the good times, but terrible during the bad times. This has real impacts on individual level regarding unemployment and inequality. While overall unemployment remains modest, youth unemployment in both countries is significantly higher than the EU average. There are multiple reasons for this, but one of the main factors is strict labor laws. When it comes to labor laws, mostly to the advantage of employees. While worker protection is great and has many benefits, it also contributes to unemployment. It's difficult to fire people, so businesses have to think critically when hiring them in the first place. However, Italian industries often cannot afford to raise wages to attract or retain talent because they are simply not as productive as their European rivals. A unique feature of the Italian labor market is that younger individuals often stay with their parents much longer than in other Western countries. This can lead to an environment of cronyism and nepotism, where young people rely on family connections for jobs rather than entrepreneurship or competitive applications. The average Italian firm is significantly smaller, 3.9 workers, than the EU average, 6.1 workers, which limits their ability to invest in the technology and specialized roles required to grow and create high-value jobs. Meanwhile, France has one of the highest minimum wages in the world and some of the highest payroll taxes, which are largely paid by the employer. This creates a trade-off. France has chosen high wages and strong social benefits over maximizing the number of people employed. This puts a massive strain on the social safety net. With only about 65% of the available labor force actively being utilized, compared to 75% in the neighboring Germany, a smaller portion of the population must power the public benefits, such as the generous pension system used by the rest of society. This is a primary reason for the recent controversial push to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. The government is attempting to keep workers contributing to the economy longer to ensure the system's sustainability. Over the last decade, economic growth in Italy and France has been stagnant. While Italy's problems are deeply tied to political instability and industrial decline, France presents a different case altogether. France's crisis is more philosophical. It is about how a country balances economic productivity with quality of life. For years, high productivity per hour was France's secret weapon, but recently productivity growth has been disappointing. Similarly, Italy's productivity has barely grown in years. Something that Italian firms have really failed to invest in is technology. Italy's small firms have lagged behind the rest of Europe in the adoption of technology, and Western Europe itself has lagged behind the USA and a lot of economies in Asia. Moreover, France and Italy is struggling with a significant budget deficit for a long time, far exceeding the EU's 3% limit. France's deficit is significantly higher than that of most other major economies, including Italy, Germany, Spain, and the UK. Today, France and Italy have the highest debt-to-GDP ratios in the Eurozone, behind only Greece. One of the reasons for this debt is government spending. Both countries are the biggest spenders on pensions and the social safety net among all OECD member countries. While high debt is manageable when interest rates are low, it is currently more expensive to lend money to France or Italy than to Greece. The rising rates mean that interest repayments will become an increasingly heavy burden on the economy, a cost that will eventually be passed on to the people through higher taxes. Even though France and Italy share much in common, Italy seems to be performing better recently. France's current political crisis has turned the country into the Eurozone's fiscal flashpoint, taking over a role long played by Italy. Recently, France suffered its second sovereign downgrade just as Italy won its first upgrade from Fitch Ratings since 2021. While the government of Giorgia Meloni has earned praise for fiscal prudence and reining in the deficit, growth remains anemic and below the EU average. Similarly, while France remains one of the most productive nations per hour worked, it is utilizing a smaller proportion of its available labor compared to neighbors like Germany. The future of the French economy depends on whether it can successfully transition from its historical dirigisme, state-led model to a more nimble, tech-integrated system without losing the unique, egalitarian culture that defines it.